Testify. Hey, Kimberly, do you want to move over yonder or yonder so I can see a little bit to the.
This anyway?
Yeah.
You're like directly in front of him.
I'm sorry.
That's what would be perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
now?
You the
Perfect.
best.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get underway. I have a sign-up sheet if you're enrolled in Biology 481 or 482, a junior, senior biology seminar. Sign in. Those of you who are not enrolled in either of those classes, welcome. STEM learning community students, people from other majors, family, friends, welcome. Just one quick announcement. This is really the last seminar that we have this year until the Eureka Symposium next Friday afternoon, which a number of you are participating in. So that should be a good event starting at 11 o'clock in the morning. Continue. Our first speaker this morning is Dan Kirk. Dan is a senior natural sciences major. He's from Mineola, Kansas, and I had to Google map it to find out where it was. It's what, about half an hour south of Dodge City or so? Yeah. And Dan's plans for next year are to move to Kansas City and try to earn some money and eventually to try to enter physical therapy school. So, and his title is up here.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My title or my seminar is called Tyrosine Inhibition, a Qualitative and Quantitative Study of Licochalcone A and its Effects on Melanogenesis and Development in Zebra Danios. It's a mouthful. Okay. So, just some background information. Melanogenesis is the formation of melanin. Melanin is kind of a catch-all term for any natural pigment that gives tissue its color, tissue being your skin, your organs, your eyes, your hair, your fingernails. Specifically, the pigment that I looked at is called eumelanin, and it's what gives tissue a brown, black color. It's produced by melanocytes by oxidizing the amino acid tyrosine. Melanogenesis is, like I said earlier, the process of melanocytes producing melanin. And melanin is important because it functions to absorb all the UV light that hits our skin. That UV light, of course, will cause sunburn, will cause DNA damage, lead to cancer or any kind of other cell death, especially in Africans. And it's important because in excess, melanin can cause what's known as hyperpigmentation. And hyperpigmentation is classified as an increase in the production or accumulation of melanin in the tissue. It can be moderate. These things are such as moles, freckles, suntans. But too much melanin and you have other problems. You see at the bottom, there's melanisma, acne scars, and Addison's disease. The one that would be most beneficial to my research would be patients that suffer from melanisma or acne scars, just due to the effectiveness, and we'll get to that later. So tyrosinase it's a gene which codes for the enzyme tyrosinase. Someone was not very creative in their name in that process. It acts on the amino acid tyrosine, and tyrosinase catalyzes melanosomes production of melanin from tyrosine by oxidizing it, like I said earlier. Through a series of reactions, tyrosine becomes eumelanin, and it starts here as tyrosine, and through its chemical pathway it becomes eumelanin. I was hoping that it would be a little bit clearer in my picture, but you're going to have to trust me that that's just called eumelanin. What's important later is during its biochemical pathway to eumelanin, It goes through several steps, several different DAPAs, which is just a name for its intermediate steps, and those will come into play later. And finally, Licochalcone A, it's a chalconoid, which is a naturally occurring phenol, and phenols are just aromatic chemicals, amino acids. It's obtained from the root Glyceres glabra, which is commonly known as the licorice plant. And Licochalcone A is interesting because it's shown anti-malarial, anti-cancer, antiviral, antibacterial properties when administered in vitro. Other chalcones have been studied for tyrosinase inhibition. And it has been suggested that Licochalcone A could work in this as well. I had the idea for studying Licochalcone A through my sister's research here in 2012, where she compared Licochalcone A and its effectiveness to inhibit melanogenesis to a very commonly used inhibitor known as kojic acid. Qualitative studies of that showed that it was in fact more efficient, so I just wanted to develop a method to measure it qualitatively, or quantitatively, excuse me. And Licochalcone A is classified as a true and competitive inhibitor because it can bind to tyrosinase, inhibit its activity, and it prevents other enzymes from binding to it and deactivating it or activating it. And other interesting things that Licochalcone A has been shown to do is increase the rate of bone growth. And aside from the anti-cancer and antibacterial, this is the only one I could qualitatively study. So during my research, I looked at accelerated bone growth as a possibility. And so why did I choose zebra Daniels? During the months of December and November, I was asking myself the same question. But really, they're beginner level fish. They're really easy to take care of. They have high tolerances for varying pHs. They'll eat almost anything. They'll eat dry foods, wet foods, their eggs, each other. They're also a very easy breeder. They'll breed readily at most temperatures with very little care. And when they're ready to spawn, they'll spawn dozens of eggs per day. So you have a constant supply of eggs. And these eggs are really nice because they're transparent and they develop really quickly. The eggs will hatch within between 2 and 3 days after fertilization. So it's really easy to see the effects in a very short-term kind of way. They're also very easy to sex. You see, the female zebra Danios are really large, they're plump, and males are more streamlined. Typically, they're smaller. Problems arose during this because immature or sexually immature males or females often looked exactly like mature females that aren't ready to spawn. So you kind of had to guess on a lot of them, and so that could have resulted in just having a tank full of guys, or a tank full of girls, and that might result in some problems that I encountered later. Not all of the females look nice and plump like this, but they should have. So my hypotheses, I hypothesized that Licochalcone A treatments will reduce the number or size of melanocytes, making the embryos appear lighter. The control groups would appear darker by comparison and by qualitative measurement. As treatment dosages increase, so will the inhibitive effects of Licochalcone A. So as I increase the dosages, the embryos will appear lighter in color. And that treated embryos will exhibit faster growth or faster bone development compared to the control groups. And so from my methods, I had two tanks, so 2 10-gallon tanks, which each tank. There was a layer of marbles at the bottom of each tank that prevented and protected the eggs from being cannibalized by their parents. And I had to vacuum these up daily, and also function while to clean the tank as well. After I vacuumed them up, I had to sort them out through their developmental ages to try to obtain the eggs that were most recently fertilized. This would hypothetically maximize the effects of Licochalcone A during development. I made a dilution of 10 to the -3rd Licochalcone because it had been researched that high dosages and high dilutions of Licochalcone can be deadly to embryos. And so I administered doses of 5, 7, and 10 microliters of the Licochalcone A solution to the eggs and had them incubate overnight for 2 days. I would take the petri dishes that housed the eggs out, photograph them at 24 hours, and then photograph the same eggs again at 48 hours, and then I was able to compare differences there. Eggs were incubated at 28 degrees. And for each dilution, I ran three trials. And during each trial of the dilution sets, I hoped to obtain at least 5 viable eggs to photograph for each treatment level. But it was typically 2 to 3 eggs. So that really cut down on the number of eggs that I was able to photograph. Most eggs were either dead or dying or exhibited some other ailment or had been eaten. And so what sets my experiment apart from my sisters, who I am furthering, is that I am quantifying my data. And so I had to develop a method of turning pictures into numbers. And this was kind of hard to do at first, but I eventually developed a method. After taking the pictures, I had to convert them to a different type of image file because they turned out to be too big for a lot of the tools that I was using. After I converted them, I had to crop the images so I could remove the background lighting, which had shown to influence the scores I would get. So I would take a picture like this and I would crop it to get a nice circular picture of just the embryo. So that was really good. Now I would take that picture and convert it to HTML code, which is a humongous string of letters, numbers, and symbols. I uploaded all those numbers, the HTML code, to a website, which would then convert each picture to grayscale, so black and white. It would reduce it to a set resolution, and then it would count the number of pixels on the screen that had been activated. So I figured it was a good method, and it was consistent when I was testing. So the numbers that were cranked out, I deemed pigmentation scores, and I collected those. And this is just a screenshot of what I did. So you take the picture, and then you convert it to a long string of numbers like this, and there's a lot because it's full all the way down. And then you just run to the top, click run, click the picture, and it will give you the brightness score. And that is what I interpreted as the pigmentation score. This is a scale from 0 to 250, with 0 being absolute darkness, just a black image, and 250 being complete brightness, so just a complete white image. And a lot of them fell in between this range, in the middle. So my results. After 24 hours, things were looking great, and it was awesome. If you look at the control group that received no treatments, each pigment, all the pigmentation scores of all the eggs collected and averaged equal much less than all the eggs that had received treatment. And after the first 24 hours, all my hypotheses, were being proven. As the dilutions went up, so did, or as, excuse me, the dosages went up, so did the results. After 5 microliters was shown to be less than the 7 microliters, which was shown to be less than the 10 microliters. So everything was good. After 48 hours, things started to take a little bit of a turn. There was a huge drop off in pigmentation scores, and a lot of them were relatively close to the control. I expected there to be a drop off in pigmentation scores because as development goes on, more pigment cells would have been created anyway, and those would have been larger as they matured. So I expected a drop off, but I was not expecting one as large as 108 down to 91, as an example of the 10 microliter treatment. And so I took the averages of all of them and put them up and compared them. And what happened was that after 48 hours, the average pigmentation of the 7 microliter dosage in the trial shown to be just slightly greater. So they were slightly brighter on average than the 10 microliter samples. And that was interesting. But however, all of them still proved to be brighter than the control group, which suggested that this was inhibiting tyrosinase. Also, I was looking at bone growth, and through all my pictures and all my experimentation, I looked and I couldn't really define or find any changes in bone growth, especially because I only looked at pictures from 48 hours, and bone growth will typically happen after 48 hours, so there wasn't a lot of bone growth like I was hoping and expecting. But a trend that did come up, which I found was incredibly interesting, was that the spinal cord was showing up much earlier in fish treated with Licochalcone. And it was the same for all fish that were treated, regardless of the dosages they received. So over on the right, or on the left, excuse me, you'll see the treated eggs, and you'll see the spinal cord running down. It's very distinguished, very developed at this point compared to what I thought might have been a premature spinal cord in the control group. And this was the same for every single egg in the control group. None of them had spinal cords develop after 24 hours. And so this was really exciting. I had no idea what this was. And especially after 48 hours, you can see that still the spinal cord has developed even further. And mostly in the control group, the spinal cord had yet to really develop. It was there, but it wasn't a predominant feature just yet. And so this was really interesting. This is not something I was expecting at all. So, discussion, Licochalcone A did inhibit melanogenesis very well during the first 24 hours. After 48 hours, melanogenesis was still inhibited, but at a much lower rate. As I said earlier, the 7 microliter dose proved to be the most effective after 48 hours and seemed to be indistinguishable from its results from the 10 microliter solution, which is not what I was expecting. Possibilities for explaining this is that since Licochalcone A is a rate-limiting enzyme, or a rate-limiting substance, it will bind to its substrate, and it will eventually just run out of substrates to bind to. So after in high dosages, there's really just nothing else to bind to. So all higher dosages just get wasted after a certain point. And I searched for reasons why spinal cord development had developed at a much faster rate. And I hypothesized that if we go back to the biochemical pathway of tyrosinase, the DAPAs in between there, there's a specific hormone called L-DAPA, and it's been shown to catalyze catalyze reactions in the brain and nervous system. So what I hypothesized was that Licochalcone was binding to these and sticking around for a little bit on these, or just not showing up at all, which would have increased the rate that spinal and brain development occurred. But I'm not really sure, there wasn't a lot of research, so it's a possibility for further research, especially looking at L-DAPA. And so the implications, Licochalcone A was proven to inhibit melanogenesis. All the fish that were treated did prove to be lighter in comparison to the control. But after 48 hours, the best dosages at 7 microliters only proved to be 10% lighter compared, but after an average of all times, it was 13% lighter. So Licochalcone A can be taken, and maybe topically, a topical cream could be created to diminish the effects of hyperpigmentation just slightly. So if you have skin redness or overpigmentation in just a small localized area, and you don't want it to be completely bleached, this could be a viable option for you if studied further. And since it appeared that Licochalcone A catalyzed spine and nervous system development, possibly a treatment could be devised to increase to treat hyposensitivity in the skin due to nerve damage, since I theorize that it could increase the rate in which nerves regenerate. So revisiting the hypotheses, Licochalcone A will reduce the number or size of melanocytes, making the fluorescent pretty lighter. This was supported. The control groups will appear darker by comparison and by qualitative measurement. This was supported, so everything was looking good. As treatment dosages increase, so will the inhibitive effects of Licochalcone. This was partially supported just because the 7 microliter dosages proved to be slightly more effective after 48 hours. And finally, treated embryos will exhibit faster bone development. This was not supported, but I think a more interesting result took its place, so I'm okay with that. Problems that arose, all my fish kept dying. And then once my fish stopped dying, they wouldn't have sex. So unfortunately, all the research and all the testing that I did this year produced absolutely no data for me. Luckily, I had an awesome research group in developmental biology, of course, I took last year, which ran a trial study of this exact study last year. So I was able to take the pictures I used there and that we found there and quantify those, and it has saved my skin. So because I wasn't able to do any of the further experimentation that I was planning on doing, none of the eggs were observed after 48 hours like I had hoped. And it was obvious during analysis of the photos that my filtering process for finding early development eggs and sorting them from later development eggs wasn't always accurate, because I would find some that were much further along in their development. So that wasn't good. A better filtering system for the eggs would have to be developed in further studies. And I assumed that I saw that the lighting for the photograph wasn't always consistent, and so that might have influenced the pigmentation scores. So for future research, just to get it out of the way, go to Petland in Wichita and buy their tank water. It's already set up, and it'll save you so much time, and it would have saved me 5 months of trying. Always more eggs equals more data, more reliable results. I don't think anyone's ever said I had too much data. So always get more eggs, a lot more than I could have gotten. And it would be interesting to compare other tyrosine inhibitors to Licochalcone to figure out which ones are more, which ones could be more effective, and possibly experiment with different means of administering the treatment to the eggs. I suggest that micro injection using ICSI needle, which is what they use for in vitro fertilizations, or electroporating the eggs to open up tiny holes for the treatment to get in a little bit earlier. And then subject the eggs to more dosages to find out if the 7 to 10 microliters or microliter split was just a fluke, or if it really if increasing the dosages really does have an effect or no effect on melanogenesis. And of course, observe the immature fish after 48 hours to see if the treatment was holding up after 48 hours. Or possibly you could re-administer the dosages and the treatments at varying times during the experiment. I would like to acknowledge Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, for just helping with everything in my life. Dr. Francisca Mendez-Hartlow and Dr. John Piper, my research advisors and my overall academic advisors, for helping me get to this point in the first place. My family, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, for just giving me support and helping me pay for Bethel. Hi, Jaden, for giving me the most support when I needed it, when I would go in early mornings to check my fish and find out that 10 out of 10 have died. The gentlemen of 9C, my bond mates, for providing lots of laughs and making fun of me for my bad fish parenting skills. Conic Rowe, Kimberly McCaughlin, and Logan Price for being my minions and feeding my fish and putting up with all my stuff. And finally, Santi Weston and Josh Jansen for actually helping me acquire my data that actually was used for the experiment. And I would like to thank Bree Serger, who actually provided the fish, who provided the eggs that ended up being my data. And this is my website. I cited a lot. Thanks.
In the interest of time, we're going to go right into our next speaker. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. So if you have some questions, write them down if you can't remember them, and we'll ask them both our speakers. So our second speaker this morning is Emma Bradley. Emma is a fourth-year biology major, and her plans after graduation are all right. And get the summer, hopefully by yeah. And Emma is from Newton, Kansas, south of here.
Okay, my study is titled Responsive Vital Signs and Reaction Time to 24-Hour Sleep Deprivation and Subsequent Caffeine Exposure in College Students. So just some background. First, we need to talk about the issue of sleep loss, which is defined as getting less than the necessary 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. It's not a clinical measure, but it can have highly visible effects on overall health. The CDC has stated that sleep is a vital sign for health, and that made me curious as to the relationship between sleep and what we typically refer to as vital signs, which would be like what they measure in the hospital, so blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature. Also, the Institute of Medicine notes that sleep deprivation is one of the most widespread and easily treated, but also most frequently ignored disorders. There's one study that found on a college campus that 27% of college students experience sleep disorders. And then other research shows that 18% of the general population of adults get insufficient sleep. So this large percentage gap shows that sleep loss is a large enough problem within society as a whole and is even bigger on college campuses. So what are some of the effects of sleep deprivation? There's both immediate and long-term consequences. And most everyone here is probably familiar with the more immediate consequences like impaired ability to pay attention, and excessive daytime sleepiness. But less people are probably familiar, at least on a personal basis, with the long-term issues which could involve cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and altered circadian rhythms. But these consequences are still widespread. They're just often attributed to other things and not really noted that sleep deprivation could be a cause of them as well. Circadian rhythms, which are associated with these long-term issues, are daily rhythms in physiology and behavior, which are partially responsible for body temperature regulation, which is part of the reason that I wanted to look at body temperature in response to short-term sleep deprivation. And the long-term hypertension causing potential of sleep deprivation made me curious about the effects on blood pressure on a short time frame as well. And then, as it's noted at the bottom here on this slide, a study by Vale Smith found that sleep deprivation also has effects like fighting, suicide ideation, drinking, and smoking in college students, which are just some of the other adverse effects of lack of sleep, even though those aren't ones that I studied directly. So then caffeine as a treatment. It's clear from all the effects of sleep deprivation that there's need for some treatment of it, and obviously the most effective would be just sleeping more, but as college students know, that's not always possible. Caffeine itself is known to increase heart rate, blood pressure, and time to exhaustion, which are some of the issues associated with sleep deprivation, so that's why caffeine would be an ideal treatment and is used by people the most often. There's research that shows that dosages of 5, 9, and 13 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight are deemed equally effective in time to exhaustion. So that's not what I studied directly, but I figured because those dosages were the same for that, they would probably be similar for my study as well. So then my study specifically, I had 3 hypotheses. The first was reaction times will be lengthened following sleep deprivation and shortened following subsequent caffeine consumption. Second, that heart rate and blood pressure will be lower following sleep deprivation as compared to a baseline. And third, that consumption of caffeine will yield an increase in blood pressure and heart rate following the 24-hour sleep deprivation period. For my participants, I only had 11 total participants, 8 females and 3 males. And these were all Bethel College students. There were 8 freshmen and sophomores and then 3 seniors. And I did my testing on 2 different weekends, one in February at the end and then one at the beginning of March. My participation was solicited via email, so this would be an email sent to all students and was only on a volunteer basis, so this would be considered a convenient sample. And if you've taken stats, you know that random sampling would be preferable, but because I was making people stay up for 24 hours, I couldn't just choose randomly from the entire population. For my research methods, I conducted 4 different tests at 3 different times. I did a baseline at 12 hours, which was considered to be before the effects of sleep deprivation started to kick in. Again, at 24 hours after sleep deprivation, and then I administered caffeine and tested again after that. The test included a test of body temperature with a simple temporal thermometer, heart rate using a pulse plethysmograph, which we used in pathophysiology lab. It just velcros onto your finger, and then the data is put into the computer where you can see the waves. I did a blood pressure test using a sphygmomanometer, and that connected to the same computer program as the heart rate monitor. And then I used a reaction time test, which is pictured here. It's made by the University of Washington, and it's just online. You would click start, and then when you saw the green light on that stoplight light up, then you would hit anywhere just on the keyboard to signal that it's and then for the sleep deprivation portion of my study, it was pretty straightforward. Participants were allowed to choose whether they wanted to stay up in the lab with Garrett or Cassie and myself, or they could just go stay up wherever they felt they would be most able to stay awake for 24 hours. And then for the caffeine portion, they came into the lab and we administered caffeine at a dosage of 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So to calculate that, I measured their weight in kilograms, multiplied that by 5, and then divided by 95 milligrams, which is the amount of caffeine in the average cup of coffee, to determine how much coffee they needed to drink. So then, for each variable for my results, I created comparative box plots for a visual representation of the change across time. And then I also did paired t-tests with the different pairings of values. So reaction time showed no real change following sleep deprivation, which is reflected in a high p-value of 0.84. This means that we can accept the null hypothesis of no change. So, yeah. And then, although caffeine didn't do a whole lot, it shortened reaction time by a little bit. And then on this graph, you can see there's some outliers at the top and bottom in the first two time periods, and it's difficult to work with outliers when I only have 11 participants, because if I wanted to take those out, that would take out almost 20% of my data, so I just chose to leave them in for the t-test. For heart rate, in this box plot, it's pretty clear that there's a fairly large decrease in heart rate following sleep deprivation, which is exactly what you would anticipate to see. And then this below p-value of 0.001 confirms that there was a significant decrease there. And then caffeine led overall to a fairly similar heart rate values, which you can tell by the actual box, not just the dark line that indicates the mean, but the mean was increased. And so it's hard to say whether caffeine was responsible for that effect or not, but it may have been. And then in this particular graph, looking at the baseline at 12 hours as compared to the post-caffeine values is important, because it tells us whether caffeine was effective at restoring functions back to normal. In this case, a higher p-value would actually be preferable, because that would mean that caffeine restored the heart rate back to where it had been to begin with. But in this case, the p-value is actually really low, so maybe it didn't restore it all the way back. And then for blood pressure measurements, I split them into systolic and diastolic, so I would be able to do the actual stats on them. So systolic is the measurement that you would see on the top of the normal blood pressure reading. Sleep deprivation caused a slight decrease in the systolic blood pressure, and then caffeine showed a bit of an increase, which would agree with previous literature. And in this case, there was a significant difference from the baseline following caffeine exposure again. And the outliers here in the post-caffeine measurements posed a problem, because when you just look at the graph, it looks like if you were to eliminate those outliers for your paired t-test, then the p-value would be significant, but actually a paired t-test, what it does is it compares the points for the same individual in both points in time, and so if you remove them from this side, you have to remove it from that side as well, and so it didn't actually make the p-value significant. For diastolic blood pressure, it increased slightly from the 12 hours to 24-hour measurements, and then stayed almost identical following caffeine exposure. And then for temperature, it changed very little at all. It decreased very slightly following sleep deprivation, and then increased to right about where it had been before following the caffeine exposure. So then my results. Looking back at my hypotheses, the reaction time would be lengthened following sleep deprivation and shortened following subsequent caffeine consumption was not supported. Heart rate and blood pressure will be lowered following sleep deprivation as compared to the baseline was partially supported. And then the consumption of caffeine will yield an increase in blood pressure, and heart rate following the 24-hour sleep deprivation period was also not supported. So then reaction time, the values were very small, and measurements are just a fraction of a second. And so in order for those values to be, even have potential to be significant, you would need a lot more people, just because the changes that you're going to see are so small. I concluded that sleep deprivation definitely decreases heart rate, which has been confirmed by a lot of literature in the past, but I just wanted to see if I was able to duplicate that. And then my study also shows that sleep deprivation has, at best, a weak effect on the systolic and diastolic blood pressure. And I found that caffeine may or may not increase heart rate and blood pressure. And heart rate showed an increase, but the effect was pretty weak, and systolic blood pressure increased pretty considerably, but diastolic didn't change at all. So then, confounding variables, I found a couple of things after conducting my study that I thought may have affected my study itself. Caffeine withdrawal could be responsible for some of my post-sleep deprivation results, because although I didn't account for it at the time because it wasn't really something I had experienced, caffeine withdrawal is a real problem with college students. Many of my participants were habitual caffeine drinkers, coffee drinkers. So they did experience the effects of caffeine withdrawal, which can include a huge range of things, including headaches, decreased alertness, slow mental performance, anger and hostility, difficulty concentrating, and a lot of others. I would say I definitely witnessed some of these. And that makes it difficult to say whether my results were due to sleep deprivation or due to caffeine withdrawal itself. And then also the amount of sleep that individuals get on a regular basis could make a difference in how they react to sleep deprivation. I asked my participants how much sleep they got the night before, and that ranged from 5 to 10 hours, so that adds another variable I really hadn't considered. People who get less sleep on a regular basis might be more equipped to deal with sleep deprivation than people who rely on getting 8 hours every night. And the limitations of my study, a couple of limitations would include my small sample size, as I mentioned, and some of the equipment I was using. Because I only had 11 participants, which is a really small sample size, I think, well, the issue getting participants, I think, lies in the fact that college students are sleep deprived to begin with, and so asking them to stay up for 24 hours and miss an entire night of sleep on a weekend is really hard, but because you don't want to take that away from them, they don't want to give it up. And then in terms of equipment, everything that we had was workable, but the blood pressure cuff was kind of old, and being able to use it with the software was definitely a learning curve. I think for some of our first participants, we weren't quite sure how to get the blood pressure cuff and heart rate to measure consistently, but by the end of it, we definitely were able to, but perhaps using like an electric blood pressure cuff would be more effective. And then for future research, like I said, increasing the sample size would be ideal. And then I mentioned early on that there was research showing which dosages of caffeine were effective, and I think it would be interesting to explore that a little more in depth, trying some different dosages than just the 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. And also using a more direct source of caffeine instead of in coffee, because it is sort of difficult to measure exactly how much caffeine is in coffee. And we didn't do any measurements like on the coffee that we used exactly to see how much was in that. And then finally, I think it would be interesting to study the effects of sleep deprivation and caffeine in different age groups. Originally, I had wanted to do 2 age groups using my peers and then people my parents' age, but I didn't think I would be able to find enough adults who would be willing to stay up for 24 hours. So that didn't pan out, but I think it would be really interesting to see that. And then acknowledgements, thanks to John, my advisor, who's been really helpful in answering my questions, and also Francisca, who's answered a lot of questions, the Bible College Biology Department in general, and then Cassie and Garrett, my minions, who stayed up all night in the lab and helped with testing. Mojos, which has fueled my project. And then Kara, my roommate, and my mom mates, who have been really helpful, and just my family and friends in general. These are my sources.
So we have about 5 minutes for questions for our speakers.
I have a question for you, Emma. I was just wondering, like, how long after they consume the caffeine did you wait to do this?
It was like 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay. Do you know how long it, like, the average cup takes to kick in?
But they did have to drink like 5 cups of coffee, so like the first ones would probably like definitely be making a difference, even if the last coffee that they drank was like,
Yeah.
If you had a chance to do the experiment again, would you pick a different fish?
You know what? I don't think I would. A lot of testing has been done with zebrafish, and they're just really ideal candidates. If I could tell you what I did wrong by keeping my fish alive, I would have stopped immediately. But I think there's much easier ways to keep the fish alive, and I just messed around with the water too much.
This is for Emma. Do you think that maybe instead of like for future research, just like to shake it up a little bit, instead of just coffee, you could try like black tea, which has a lot of caffeine in it or something like that? Yeah. That'd be really interesting.
Okay, Dan, I was wondering, your treatment on the fish was supposed to make their pigment lighter, right?
It was supposed to decrease the pigment cells.
Okay, so when you did the like pigment score, it looked like the more Licochalcone, the more that you gave, it looked like the higher the pigment score.
Yeah, pigment score. So the higher the pigment score, the lighter the fish. So
Okay,
higher pigment scores meant that there was less.
gotcha.
melanocytes
Okay.
being activated.
I have a question for you. So, Daniel, what was your method of exposing the embryos to the water?
Yeah. So what I did to expose it to them, I just dropped them in a 4-chamber petri dish. So it's just a petri dish with 4 sections in it. I would take 3 milliliters of tank water, put them in each section, and then I would drop the eggs in, usually just 5 per section. And then I would, I bet, 5 milliliters, 7 milliliters, just right into it to just surround.
How long did you do it?
They made it for the entire 40 hours.
And then Emma, a few of your participants like had fever and had very wide-ranging blood pressure. Is there any point for the health? I was like, oh my lord, I don't think they're healthy.
I think the really high blood pressure was probably just because we weren't familiar with the equipment we were using. I don't think the blood pressure was actually that high.
Okay.
And then, but we would be consistent with our weirdness of using the equipment though. So like, if it was kind of weird the first time we tested your blood pressure, we did the same thing the second time. So then it should be okay, like comparing the cross.
Your first measurements were really wide-ranging, and your last measurements were pretty, the ranges were much narrower. But that affected your experiment or your blood pressure.
I think it could probably be something that just like things affect different people differently and also
So I know we had the problem last year with the foreign organisms.
Yeah.
Did you have that problem this year?
Well,
No.
there were, nematodes got into the eggs and devoured them. I wish I could say that I did have that problem, but I didn't get any eggs to test during this entire year.
Yeah.
So
I know.
I imagine that it would have been the same. I don't know how to keep the nematodes at home. Yes.
Okay. For future research, what other types of treatment do you think would be interesting to look at other than the ones that you did?
Like inhibitors.
Mhm.
Oh, there's a wide range. There's some that come from potatoes.
Potato fish.
I can't remember the name of it. It's a long chemical name, and I'm bad at chemistry. But there are a lot of known inhibitors. Kojic acid, which my sister looked at, has been crowned the champion of them all. And she showed in her research that Licochalcone was better qualitatively. And so I wanted to show what it can do quantitatively, what would be a smart thing to do in future research, would actually compare kojic acid and Licochalcone quantitatively. I couldn't do that this year.
Right. Mhm.
What timeline.
I just want to make a comment in your talk, Emma. I'm wondering if the research could have been done during the summer, where students or your study group would have felt less anxious about losing sleep, because it's easier to stay up in the summer. Just kind of a plug for writing a Eureka grant and doing the work in the summer, and then you could students maybe be more flexible, and you could bring your dose and have a larger period of time to work. All right, so we are done, and I guess we'll reconvene on May 6th. If you did sign the sheet that's going around, make sure you do that.